They told her she wasn't Ranger material. 3 different selection boards, 3 rejections, 3 polite explanations about why the 75th Ranger Regiment wasn't the right fit for Staff Sergeant Maria Elena Vasquez. But what those boards didn't know was that she had already been conducting the kind of night operations that most Rangers only dreamed about. They just never bothered to look beyond her personnel file. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Staff Sergeant Maria Vasquez had been assigned to the 3rd Special Forces Group Support Battalion at Fort Liberty for exactly 4 months when the joint training exercise began. At 5 feet 6 inches, with jet black hair kept in a perfect military regulation style and dark eyes that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light, she moved through her duties with the kind of methodical precision that made her essentially invisible to most personnel. Her official role was Logistics Coordination Specialist, a position that required managing supply chains, coordinating equipment transfers, and ensuring that special operations units had everything they needed for training exercises. It was important work, absolutely critical to mission success, but it was also the kind of behind-the-scenes responsibility that rarely drew attention or recognition. The Green Berets she supported knew her simply as Sergeant Vasquez, or the Logistics Coordinator. She processed their equipment requests with remarkable efficiency, anticipated their needs before they expressed them, and maintained supply lines with the kind of reliability that allowed operators to focus entirely on their missions without worrying about whether their gear would be available when needed. Her workspace was a model of military organization. Inventory sheets arranged in perfect order, computer screens displaying real-time tracking of equipment and supplies, communication devices positioned for immediate access, and personal effects limited to the regulation minimum. Everything about her environment suggested competence, reliability, and complete dedication to supporting others, rather than seeking personal recognition. To the special operations personnel she supported, Maria represented exactly what good military logistics should be: competent, reliable, and completely unremarkable. She was support staff who made their jobs easier by handling essential but unglamorous responsibilities that allowed them to focus on tactical training and operational preparation. The operators had developed their standard assumptions about her role and background. She obviously understood military procedures and had clearly received excellent training in logistics management. Her knowledge of special operations equipment was comprehensive, and her ability to coordinate complex supply requirements was unquestioned. But she was also remarkably reserved, speaking only when necessary for professional purposes, and never participating in the informal conversations that typically developed between support personnel and the operators they served. Master Sergeant Carlos Rivera, a veteran Green Beret team leader with 3 combat deployments, had worked with Maria for several weeks during a complex training exercise. Rivera was known throughout the 3rd Special Forces Group for his tactical expertise and his ability to evaluate personnel capabilities quickly and accurately. "Vasquez knows her stuff," Rivera had mentioned to his team sergeant during their 2nd week of working with her. "Equipment requests processed perfectly, supply lines maintained flawlessly, and she anticipates requirements we haven't even thought of yet. But she's probably the most professionally distant logistics coordinator I've ever worked with. Competent as hell, but you never get any sense of who she actually is beyond the supply sheets." Sergeant First Class David Chen, who served as Rivera's communications specialist, had offered some perspective based on his own experience working with various support personnel. "Some logistics people are just focused on maintaining professional boundaries, Sergeant. Doesn't mean they don't understand what we're doing out here, but yeah, she's definitely more reserved than most." Chen's observation was accurate, but it didn't capture the full picture. Maria's professional distance wasn't just unusual for military logistics personnel. It suggested someone who had learned to maintain operational security about personal background and experience. Most support staff developed casual relationships with the operators they served, but Maria maintained a clinical detachment that seemed almost deliberate. During the joint training exercise, Maria's daily routine was predictable and thoroughly professional. She arrived at 0530, reviewed overnight equipment reports and supply status updates, attended morning briefings to understand the day's training evolution and logistical requirements, coordinated with multiple supply chains to ensure equipment availability, and positioned herself strategically to respond immediately to any logistical emergencies. Her competence was unquestioned by everyone who worked with her. Equipment appeared exactly when needed. Supply problems were resolved before they could impact training, and complex coordination requirements were handled with the kind of expertise that suggested years of experience in demanding military environments. But there were small details that didn't quite fit the standard profile of a logistics specialist. Maria's understanding of tactical equipment went beyond basic supply management. She knew operational applications, maintenance requirements under field conditions, and compatibility issues that most logistics personnel learned only through extensive experience supporting actual missions. Her communication procedures were more sophisticated than necessary for routine supply coordination. She used radio protocols that suggested familiarity with operational security requirements, and her written reports demonstrated understanding of mission planning and tactical considerations that exceeded what was typically expected from support staff. Most significantly, her physical conditioning was exceptional for someone in a logistics role. Maria maintained the kind of fitness level typically associated with combat personnel rather than support staff. She participated in physical training with an intensity that seemed unnecessary for her current assignment, and her movement patterns suggested familiarity with tactical techniques that went far beyond basic military training. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Walsh, who worked in personnel administration and had processed Maria's assignment paperwork, had noticed some unusual elements in her background. "Vasquez has an interesting service record," Walsh had mentioned to her supervisor. "Multiple schools and certifications that seem pretty advanced for someone in logistics, but her personnel file doesn't include details about previous assignments that would explain that level of training." The gaps in Maria's official record were subtle but significant. Her military education included courses that were typically reserved for personnel, with security clearances higher than what logistics positions required. Her previous duty stations were listed, but without the detailed assignment descriptions that usually accompanied military personnel files. These discrepancies weren't necessarily suspicious. Military personnel records often reflected career changes and evolving specializations. But they suggested that Maria's background might be more complex than her current role indicated. During the third week of the joint training exercise, an incident occurred that provided the first hint that Maria's capabilities extended beyond logistics coordination. A complex equipment failure had disrupted a night training evolution, and the standard supply chain procedures weren't adequate to resolve the problem quickly enough to maintain the training schedule. Maria had volunteered to personally coordinate an emergency equipment replacement that required working through multiple military installations and civilian contractors. The solution she developed was remarkably sophisticated, involving alternative supply sources and expedited transportation arrangements that most logistics personnel wouldn't have known were available. "How did you know about those alternative procurement channels?" Rivera had asked when Maria delivered the replacement equipment ahead of schedule. "Previous assignments involved working with various supply networks," Maria had replied carefully. "You learn about alternative resources when standard procedures aren't adequate for mission requirements." Rivera had accepted the explanation, but something about Maria's response suggested experience with situations where normal supply chains weren't available. The kind of experience that came from supporting operations in denied or austere environments where logistics personnel needed to be creative and resourceful. The training exercise continued, and Maria maintained her role as reliable, competent, and unremarkable support staff. But for those who paid attention to details, small indicators suggested that her background might include experiences that went beyond routine military logistics assignments. Her professional competence was absolute, her dedication was unquestioned, and her contribution to mission success was invaluable. But assumptions about her role and capabilities remained unchallenged, because nothing in her current performance suggested that she was anything other than exactly what she appeared to be: professional military support staff who enabled others to accomplish their missions. The joint training exercise was scheduled to continue for 2 more weeks, with increasingly complex scenarios designed to test special operations capabilities under realistic conditions. Maria would continue providing logistics support with the same steady competence that had characterized her entire assignment. But assumptions can be dangerous, especially when they're made about people whose true capabilities remain carefully hidden beneath professional competence and deliberate reserve. The first crack in Maria's carefully constructed facade appeared during week 4 of the joint training exercise, when Alpha Team found themselves facing an unexpected challenge that their standard training hadn't prepared them for. The exercise scenario involved a simulated hostage rescue in an urban environment, but equipment malfunctions had forced the team to adapt their approach significantly. Their night vision systems had failed during final preparation, and replacement equipment wouldn't arrive until the following day. Most support personnel would have simply rescheduled the training evolution. Maria appeared at the team's Tactical Operations Center at 2,130 hours, carrying a case of equipment that none of them recognized. Alternative night vision capability, she announced quietly, opening the case to reveal devices that looked significantly more advanced than their standard-issue gear. Sergeant First Class Tommy Rodriguez, Alpha Team's demolition specialist, examined the equipment with obvious curiosity. "Sergeant Vasquez, where did this gear come from?" "This isn't standard inventory." "Special procurement through alternative channels," Maria replied, but her explanation was accompanied by something unexpected. She began providing technical briefings on the equipment that demonstrated knowledge far beyond what logistics personnel typically possessed. "These systems operate on different infrared frequencies than your standard NODs," she explained, with precision that suggested hands-on experience rather than textbook knowledge. "Battery life is extended, image resolution is superior in low-light conditions, and they're compatible with weapon-mounted targeting systems." Quote, Master Sergeant Rivera listened to Maria's technical briefing with growing interest. Her understanding wasn't theoretical. She was describing operational characteristics that came from extensive field experience with advanced night vision technology. "Vasquez," Rivera interrupted, "how do you know the operational specifications for this equipment?" Maria paused slightly before responding. "Previous assignments required familiarity with various night vision systems. You learn technical details when equipment performance directly impacts mission success." Rivera exchanged glances with his team members. Maria's explanation was plausible, but something about her knowledge base suggested experience that went beyond routine logistic support. The night vision equipment she had provided was exceptional. Alpha Team's training evolution proceeded flawlessly, with image quality and system reliability that exceeded anything they had experienced with standard gear. But more significantly, Maria had remained in the Tactical Operations Center throughout the night exercise, monitoring communications and tracking team movement with the kind of tactical awareness that seemed unusual for support personnel. "She's tracking our movement patterns like she's running tactical Overwatch," Rodriguez observed to his teammate during a brief communication break. "Most logistics people wouldn't understand tactical positioning well enough to follow what we're doing." Sergeant Chen had noticed similar details. "Did you catch how she responded to our communications?" She understood tactical terminology and radio procedures that aren't typically part of logistics training. After the successful completion of the night exercise, Rivera approached Maria with questions that reflected his growing curiosity about her background. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Sergeant Vasquez, that equipment you provided tonight was significantly more advanced than our standard inventory. What kind of previous assignments gave you access to that level of technology?" Maria's response was carefully measured. "Military logistics often involves supporting units with specialized equipment requirements. You develop familiarity with various systems when your job is ensuring that operators have what they need for mission success." But Rivera wasn't entirely satisfied with the explanation. Something about Maria's knowledge and capabilities suggested experience that extended beyond traditional support roles. The following week brought another incident that further revealed the depth of Maria's unusual expertise. Bravo Team was conducting advanced reconnaissance training when their primary communication system suffered a critical failure that threatened to compromise the entire exercise. Standard protocol would have been to abort the training and reschedule after communications equipment could be repaired or replaced. The technical complexity of the system failure was beyond what most personnel could diagnose, let alone repair under field conditions. Maria volunteered to assess the communications problem, and what happened next surprised everyone involved. She didn't just diagnose the technical failure. She implemented a field repair using improvised techniques that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of military communication systems. "The primary relay board has a power regulation failure," she explained while working on the equipment. "We can bypass the damaged components by rerouting power through secondary channels and adjusting frequency modulation to compensate for the reduced signal strength." Staff Sergeant Lisa Martinez, Bravo Team's communications specialist, watched Maria's repair work with amazement. Sergeant Vasquez, where did you learn those techniques? That's advanced communications repair that most signal specialists wouldn't attempt under field conditions. Previous experience with communications equipment maintenance, Maria replied while completing the repair. When standard systems fail in critical situations, you learn alternative approaches to maintain operational capability. The repaired communications system functioned perfectly for the remainder of the exercise, but Martinez was impressed by more than just Maria's technical skills. She understood the tactical implications of the communications failure, Martinez explained to her team leader. She knew which frequencies to prioritize and how to maintain security protocols during the repair. That's not logistics knowledge. That's operational communications expertise. As the joint training exercise progressed, additional incidents revealed aspects of Maria's capabilities that seemed inconsistent with her official role. During a complex insertion exercise, she had provided tactical analysis of landing zones that demonstrated understanding of helicopter operations and insertion techniques. When equipment weight restrictions had threatened to compromise a training scenario, she had suggested load distribution strategies that reflected experience with airborne operations. Most significantly, Maria's physical performance during routine activities suggested conditioning that went far beyond what logistics positions required. She participated in morning physical training with an intensity that matched the special operations personnel she supported. Her movement patterns during equipment handling demonstrated tactical awareness and situational consciousness that seemed almost instinctive. Sergeant Walsh, who had previously noticed irregularities in Maria's personnel file, decided to investigate further. "I've been reviewing Vasquez's service record," she mentioned to her supervisor. "Her military education includes schools that are typically reserved for personnel with tactical assignments. Advanced communications, survival training, language certification, and weapons qualifications that seem excessive for logistics specialization." The investigation revealed additional questions about Maria's background. Her previous duty stations included assignments to units with classified missions, but details about her specific roles weren't included in accessible personnel records. Her security clearance level was higher than what logistics positions typically required, and her specialized training exceeded what most support personnel received. "There are gaps in her official record that suggest classified assignments," Walsh explained. "Either she's had experience with special operations units, or her background includes activities that aren't reflected in standard personnel documentation." These discoveries created growing curiosity among the special operations personnel about Maria's true background and capabilities. Her professional competence was unquestioned, but the depth of her knowledge and skills suggested experience that extended far beyond traditional military logistics. Master Sergeant Rivera began paying closer attention to Maria's interactions and responses during training exercises. Her understanding of tactical procedures, her familiarity with advanced equipment, and her ability to solve complex technical problems under pressure all suggested a background that she wasn't fully revealing. "Vasquez has capabilities that don't match her current assignment," Rivera mentioned to his team. "Either she's overqualified for logistics, or her previous experience involved responsibilities that aren't reflected in her current role." The joint training exercise was approaching its final phase, with increasingly complex scenarios designed to test special operations capabilities under realistic conditions. Maria continued providing logistics support with the same professional competence that had characterized her performance throughout the exercise. But the growing awareness of her unusual capabilities had created an undercurrent of curiosity and speculation among the personnel she supported. They were beginning to understand that their logistics coordinator possessed knowledge and skills that suggested a background far more complex than her current role indicated. The assumptions they had made about Maria's limitations were being challenged by evidence that she possessed experience and capabilities that remained carefully hidden beneath her professional competence and deliberate reserve. The moment that would shatter Maria's carefully maintained cover arrived on a Tuesday morning during the 5th week of the joint training exercise, when an unexpected visitor walked into the 3rd Special Forces Group compound with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested urgent business. Lieutenant Commander Jake "Ghost" Patterson had arrived at Fort Liberty to coordinate upcoming joint maritime operations between Navy SEAL Team 6 and Army Special Forces units. Patterson was a legend in the special operations community, a veteran of more classified missions than most operators would see in their entire careers, with a reputation for tactical innovation that had influenced military doctrine worldwide. At 6 feet 2 inches, with weathered features that spoke of years in harsh environments and ice-blue eyes that seemed to assess everything with tactical precision, Patterson moved through military installations with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned respect through actions rather than rank. His presence at Fort Liberty indicated that the upcoming joint operations were significantly more important than routine training exercises. Patterson entered the compound's main briefing facility to meet with Colonel Marcus Thompson, the 3rd Special Forces Group commander, regarding coordination protocols for the maritime operations. The meeting was scheduled to cover insertion techniques, communication procedures, and equipment compatibility between Navy and Army Special Operations units. As Patterson walked through the Logistics Coordination Center on his way to the briefing room, his attention was focused on understanding the facility layout and identifying key personnel who would be involved in supporting the joint operations. His assessment was professional and routine until his gaze reached the workstation where Maria was coordinating equipment inventories for the ongoing training exercise. Patterson stopped walking. His entire demeanor shifted from casual professional assessment to something much more intense. Recognition mixed with what appeared to be genuine surprise and disbelief. He stared at Maria for several seconds, as if processing something he hadn't expected to encounter. Maria looked up from her computer screen and met Patterson's gaze. For the first time since her assignment to Fort Liberty, her professional composure cracked visibly. Her eyes widened slightly, and something that looked like panic flashed across her features before she quickly regained control. Patterson continued staring, and then something remarkable happened. This veteran Navy SEAL commander, who had led some of the most classified operations in military history, slowly came to attention and spoke a single word that carried clearly across the logistics center. Shadowhawk. The word hit the facility like a physical impact. Every conversation stopped, every head turned. The logistics center, which moments before had been filled with the routine sounds of administrative work, became completely silent. Shadowhawk wasn't a name. It was clearly a military call sign, the kind of operational identifier used only in the most classified and dangerous military missions. And Patterson's voice was filled with unmistakable recognition, respect, and something that sounded like awe. Master Sergeant Rivera, who had been reviewing training schedules at a nearby workstation, immediately understood that he was witnessing something extraordinary. Navy SEAL commanders didn't snap to attention for logistics coordinators unless there was a history that exceeded normal military relationships. Maria stood slowly from her workstation, and for the first time since anyone at Fort Liberty had known her, she dropped her carefully maintained professional reserve. "Ghost," she replied quietly, her voice carrying a warmth and familiarity that no one had ever heard before. "I didn't expect to see you here." Patterson held his position of attention for several more seconds, then relaxed into a less formal posture, but his expression remained filled with obvious respect and recognition. "Ma'am," Patterson said, "I had no idea you were assigned to Fort Liberty. It's an honor to see you again." The logistics center remained frozen. Personnel throughout the facility were trying to process what they had witnessed. Their reserved logistics coordinator had just been recognized by one of the most respected special operations commanders in the military, addressed by what was clearly an operational call sign, and treated with the kind of reverence typically reserved for legendary military leaders. Sergeant Chen, who had been closest to the interaction, approached with obvious curiosity and respect. "Sergeant Vasquez, Commander Patterson seems to recognize you from previous assignments. Have you two worked together before?" Maria's response was carefully measured, but her usual professional distance had been replaced by something more authentic. "Commander Patterson and I have crossed paths in previous operational assignments." But Patterson, still clearly impressed by the unexpected encounter, was less reserved about providing context. "Crossed paths?" he said with obvious respect in his voice. "Ma'am, that's putting it mildly." Patterson looked around at the logistics personnel and special operations teams who were listening to the conversation, then made a decision about how much information to share. He understood that his recognition had already revealed more about Maria's background than she had intended to disclose. "Gentlemen," Patterson said, addressing the assembled personnel, "you've been working with one of the most accomplished night operations specialists in the United States military. Sergeant Vasquez isn't just logistics support. She's someone who has conducted missions that most special operations personnel will never have the clearance to know about." The revelation hit the logistics center like an explosion. The quiet, professional coordinator they had been taking for granted was actually a veteran of classified special operations with experience that exceeded the backgrounds of most personnel at the facility. Staff Sergeant Martinez stepped forward with obvious amazement and respect. "Sergeant Vasquez, sir, if you don't mind me asking, what was your previous assignment before logistics duty?" Maria seemed to be weighing how much information to share, understanding that Patterson's recognition had fundamentally changed her situation at Fort Liberty. "My previous assignments involved specialized night operations that required both tactical and support capabilities," she replied carefully. But Patterson, still clearly impressed by the encounter, was willing to provide more specific context. Sergeant Vasquez was the primary tactical coordinator for some of the most classified night insertion and extraction operations in Special Operations history. The call sign Shadowhawk was earned through missions where she planned and executed infiltration operations that conventional forces couldn't attempt. The assembled personnel were beginning to understand that their logistics coordinator had operational experience that exceeded most of their own training and probably their future assignments. Planning classified night operations was among the most demanding and dangerous work in the military, requiring expertise that few personnel ever developed. Master Sergeant Rivera asked the question everyone was thinking. "Sergeant Vasquez, how do you transition from leading classified night operations to providing logistics support for training exercises?" Maria's answer reflected the complex career paths that characterized the most experienced military professionals, but also revealed why she had been maintaining such careful operational security about her background. "Military careers involve multiple phases of service," she replied. "Sometimes the most valuable contribution you can make is ensuring that the next generation of operators has the support they need to succeed. But some operational experiences require maintaining security protocols even after assignments end." Patterson understood the implications of Maria's statement. Her previous operations had been classified at levels that required ongoing operational security, which explained why her personnel file contained gaps and why she had been maintaining such professional distance from the personnel she supported. The Operation Shadowhawk planned and executed, Patterson explained to the assembled group, involved insertion techniques and tactical approaches that influenced current special operations doctrine. Her work saved lives and completed missions that conventional approaches couldn't have accomplished. Colonel Thompson, who had been waiting for Patterson in the briefing room, arrived to investigate the unusual gathering in the logistics center. "Commander Patterson, is there a problem with our logistics support?" Patterson's response revealed the full significance of his recognition. "Colonel, there's no problem with your logistics support, but I've just discovered that you have one of the most experienced night operations specialists in the military assigned to coordinate equipment inventories." Thompson looked at Maria with obvious surprise and growing interest. As the 3rd Special Forces Group commander, he understood the implications of Patterson's statement. If Maria possessed the operational experience that Patterson described, her current assignment represented a significant underutilization of exceptional capabilities. "Sergeant Vasquez," Thompson said, "I think we need to discuss how your operational experience might contribute more effectively to our training programs." Maria understood that Patterson's recognition had ended her ability to maintain a low profile at Fort Liberty. Her cover as routine logistics support had been permanently compromised, and her true background was now known to personnel throughout the facility. But more importantly, the recognition had occurred in front of special operations personnel who could appreciate the significance of her experience and capabilities. The assumptions they had developed about her limitations had been completely shattered by Patterson's revelation of her true background and operational history. The moment when Patterson had snapped to attention and called out Shadowhawk had lasted only seconds, but its impact would reshape Maria's role at Fort Liberty and demonstrate that extraordinary capabilities often remain hidden behind ordinary professional responsibilities until the right person recognizes what others have failed to see. The emergency alert system at Fort Liberty activated at 0347 hours on Thursday morning, 3 days after Patterson's revelation had transformed Maria's status from unknown logistics coordinator to recognized special operations veteran. The base-wide announcement cut through the pre-dawn darkness with urgent authority that immediately mobilized every military installation within a 50-mile radius. All personnel, code red emergency activation. The terrorist cell has breached perimeter security at the Bragg Special Operations Command Facility. Multiple armed hostiles, estimated 6 to 8 individuals, have taken control of classified training areas and are holding an unknown number of personnel hostage. All units implement immediate response protocols. The situation was unprecedented in its severity and complexity. The Bragg Special Operations Command Facility housed some of the most sensitive training programs and classified materials in the United States military. A successful terrorist attack on this installation could compromise ongoing operations worldwide and endanger military personnel across multiple theaters of operation. Within minutes of the alert, Fort Liberty transformed into a coordinated response operation. Special operations teams from multiple units began rapid deployment toward the compromised facility, but the tactical situation was unlike anything they had trained for on American soil. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the Fort Liberty operations commander, established the Tactical Command Center in the main briefing facility where Maria had been conducting her logistics coordination duties. Mitchell was a veteran of multiple combat deployments with extensive experience in crisis management, but the current situation presented challenges that exceeded conventional response protocols. Intelligence reports indicate the terrorist cell infiltrated the facility during the night shift change, Mitchell explained to the assembled response teams. They've taken control of Building 47, which houses advanced tactical training simulators and classified communications equipment. Unknown number of hostages, but we're estimating 12 to 15 military personnel trapped inside. The tactical complexity was staggering. Building 47 was designed as a secure facility with multiple levels, reinforced construction, and limited access points that made conventional assault approaches extremely dangerous. The terrorists had chosen their target with sophisticated understanding of military facility security and defensive advantages. Master Sergeant Rivera, whose Alpha team had been designated as one of the primary response units, understood immediately that standard assault procedures would be inadequate. Colonel, Building 47's architecture makes conventional entry techniques extremely risky. Those terrorists knew exactly what facility they were targeting. Quote, Commander Patterson, who had remained at Fort Liberty for ongoing joint operation planning, joined the Tactical Command Center and brought his extensive special operations experience to the crisis response. This isn't random terrorism, Patterson observed. They've demonstrated detailed knowledge of facility layout, security procedures, and personnel schedules. This is a sophisticated operation with specific objectives. The initial intelligence gathering revealed the full scope of the crisis. The terrorist cell had not only taken hostages but had also gained access to classified training materials and communication systems that could compromise special operations security if transmitted to hostile organizations. The situation required immediate resolution, but conventional assault approaches carried unacceptable risks to hostage safety. Standard SWAT protocols won't work here, Mitchell explained to the response teams. Building 47's defensive characteristics give the terrorists significant tactical advantages. We need specialized approaches that account for the facility's unique security features and the sophisticated capabilities these terrorists have demonstrated. The crisis deepened when communications intercepts revealed that the terrorist cell was attempting to access classified computer systems within Building 47. Their objectives extended beyond taking hostages. They were conducting intelligence-gathering operations that could compromise military operations globally. They're not just holding hostages, reported Captain Diana Foster, the facility's intelligence officer. Electronic surveillance indicates they're attempting to download classified training protocols and operational procedures. If they succeed, this could compromise special operations security worldwide. The time pressure was enormous. Every minute the terrorists remained in control of Building 47 increased the risk of classified information being compromised and hostages being harmed. But conventional assault techniques carried equally unacceptable risks of casualties and mission failure. Patterson understood that the crisis required tactical approaches that exceeded standard military response capabilities. Colonel Mitchell, this situation demands specialized night operations techniques. The facility's security features can be turned to our advantage, but only with approaches that most units haven't trained for. Mitchell faced an impossible decision. Standard protocols were inadequate, but alternative approaches required capabilities and expertise that might not be available among the response teams at Fort Liberty. The crisis was escalating by the minute, and conventional solutions were proving insufficient. During the tactical planning session, Maria had remained in the command center, continuing her logistics coordination duties by ensuring that response teams had necessary equipment and supplies. Her presence was largely overlooked as commanders focused on developing assault plans and coordinating specialized resources. But, as the tactical discussion continued, it became clear that the crisis required exactly the kind of specialized night operations expertise that Patterson had recognized in Maria 3 days earlier. The facility's architecture, the terrorists' sophisticated preparation, and the classified materials at risk demanded approaches that conventional training hadn't prepared the response teams to execute. "The insertion points they're considering won't work," Maria said quietly, speaking for the first time during the tactical planning session. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone who had analyzed similar situations many times before. The command center fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the logistics coordinator who had just offered tactical analysis of a crisis that was challenging experienced special operations commanders. "Explain your assessment, Sergeant," Mitchell ordered, understanding that Maria's recently revealed background might provide insights that conventional approaches had missed. Maria approached the tactical display that showed Building 47's layout and security features. The terrorists chose their positions to neutralize conventional entry techniques, but they've also created vulnerabilities that specialized night infiltration methods could exploit. She began pointing to specific areas of the facility layout with precision that demonstrated intimate understanding of tactical infiltration principles. These defensive positions protect against standard assault approaches, but they create blind spots that unconventional infiltration techniques could exploit. The facility's security features can be turned against the terrorists if approached correctly. Patterson watched Maria's tactical analysis with growing recognition. "Shadowhawk, are you suggesting the kind of infiltration approaches you used in classified operations?" Quote, "The principles are similar," Maria replied. "This facility's architecture creates the same tactical challenges we faced in denied territory operations, but it also creates the same opportunities for unconventional approaches." Mitchell understood that Maria was offering tactical expertise that could resolve the crisis, but she also recognized that implementing such approaches would require capabilities that exceeded what conventional response teams possessed. "Sergeant Vasquez, what would unconventional infiltration approaches require in terms of personnel and equipment?" Maria's response revealed the full scope of what specialized night operations could accomplish, but also the extraordinary demands such approaches placed on personnel and resources. Successful infiltration would require personnel trained in advanced night movement techniques, specialized equipment for bypassing security systems, and tactical coordination that accounts for multiple entry points and extraction routes. The command center understood that Maria was describing capabilities that most special operations units trained for, but few had the opportunity to implement under actual operational conditions. But the crisis at Building 47 was exactly the kind of situation where such specialized techniques could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. "Colonel," Patterson said, "I believe Sergeant Vasquez is offering to lead the kind of operation that could resolve this crisis successfully." Mitchell looked at Maria with the recognition that the logistics coordinator she had been taking for granted might be the key to resolving the most serious security crisis Fort Liberty had ever faced. The emergency was escalating rapidly, classified materials were at risk, hostages were in immediate danger, and conventional approaches were proving inadequate. But standing in the tactical command center was someone whose specialized experience might provide exactly the capabilities needed to resolve the crisis successfully. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell made the decision that would change everything at 0412 hours, 25 minutes after the crisis began. "Sergeant Vasquez, I'm authorizing you to take tactical command of this operation. You have complete authority to select personnel and implement whatever approaches you determine necessary." The transformation was immediate and absolute. Maria stepped away from her logistics workstation and moved to the tactical command center with a bearing that nobody at Fort Liberty had ever seen before. Gone was the reserved, careful logistics coordinator. In her place stood someone who radiated the quiet confidence of a leader who had successfully executed impossible missions under conditions that would break most military personnel. "I need satellite imagery of Building 47 updated within the last 6 hours, thermal readings of all interior spaces, and complete architectural blueprints including ventilation systems and electrical conduits," Maria ordered with crisp authority. "Also get me personnel files on everyone inside that building so I know exactly who we're extracting." Captain Foster immediately began coordinating the intelligence requirements, but she was amazed by the specificity and sophistication of Maria's requests. "Sergeant, those intelligence parameters are extremely detailed. Most tactical commanders wouldn't know to request that level of facility analysis. Most tactical commanders haven't planned infiltration operations where missing a single architectural detail meant mission failure and personnel death, Maria replied while studying the facility layouts. Her voice carried the weight of experience with missions where perfection was the only acceptable standard. Patterson watched Maria's transformation with recognition and respect. This is what Shadowhawk looked like when she was planning operations that everyone said were impossible. Within minutes, Maria had assembled a tactical picture of Building 47 that exceeded anything the conventional response teams had developed. She identified 17 different potential entry points, analyzed terrorist positioning based on facility architecture, and developed 3 separate extraction routes that accounted for various contingencies. The terrorists have positioned themselves to control the main corridors and stairwells, Maria explained to the assembled response teams. Their placement is tactically sound for defending against conventional assault, but they've created gaps in their perimeter that specialized infiltration techniques can exploit. Master Sergeant Rivera studied Maria's tactical analysis with growing amazement. Her understanding of facility exploitation and defensive positioning exceeded what most special operations personnel developed, even after years of training and experience. Sergeant Vasquez, how do you identify vulnerabilities that our tactical assessment missed? Rivera asked. Because I've planned operations where missing those vulnerabilities meant watching teammates die, Maria replied with intensity that revealed the stakes of her previous missions. In denied territory, there are no second chances and no backup plans. You identify every possible advantage or you don't come home. Maria began selecting personnel for the infiltration operation with precision that demonstrated intimate understanding of individual capabilities and specializations. She chose Sergeant Chen for his communications expertise, Staff Sergeant Martinez for her technical skills, and Petty Officer Rodriguez for his demolitions background. But her personnel selections revealed knowledge of individual capabilities that exceeded what logistics coordinators typically possessed. She knew details about training backgrounds, specialized skills, and operational experience that suggested she had been conducting detailed assessments of Fort Liberty personnel for weeks. Chen, your communications background includes electronic warfare training that isn't in your official personnel file, Maria stated. Martinez, you've had advanced lockpicking and security system training. Rodriguez, your demolition expertise includes shaped charges for precise structural work. The selected personnel looked at each other with amazement. Maria knew details about their capabilities that they hadn't shared with anyone at Fort Liberty, suggesting intelligence-gathering abilities that went far beyond routine administrative oversight. How do you know about classified training that's not in our accessible records? Chen asked. Because identifying personnel capabilities was essential for mission planning in my previous assignments, Maria replied. You learned to recognize specialized skills when selecting team members could mean the difference between mission success and everyone dying. Maria's equipment requests revealed the full scope of her operational expertise. She requisitioned gear that most personnel at Fort Liberty didn't know existed, including advanced night vision systems, specialized climbing equipment, electronic countermeasures devices, and weapons configurations that suggested experience with the most classified military technology. This equipment isn't in our standard inventory, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell observed. How do you know it's available? Quote, because I know where specialized gear is stored for operations that exceed conventional capabilities, Maria replied. My previous assignments required access to equipment that most units never see. Within 30 minutes, Maria had transformed the crisis response from conventional military planning to sophisticated special operations execution. Her approach integrated intelligence gathering, tactical analysis, personnel selection, and equipment coordination, with the kind of seamless expertise that comes from leading the most demanding missions in the military. The infiltration will proceed in 3 phases, Maria explained to the assembled team. Phase 1 involves electronic surveillance and perimeter reconnaissance to confirm terrorist positions and hostage locations. Phase 2 is simultaneous multi-point infiltration using techniques that bypass their defensive positioning. Phase 3 is coordinated extraction that gets everyone out alive. Patterson listened to Maria's operational briefing with respect that reflected recognition of exceptional capability. This is exactly the kind of planning that made Shadowhawk legendary in the special operations community. But Maria's transformation went beyond tactical planning. Her physical preparation revealed conditioning and capabilities that nobody at Fort Liberty had suspected. She changed into tactical gear with movements that demonstrated familiarity with specialized equipment, and her weapons handling showed proficiency that exceeded most combat personnel. Where did you learn those weapons techniques? Rodriguez asked, watching Maria configure her rifle with modifications that suggested extensive operational experience. In places where weapon malfunctions meant dying alone in hostile territory, Maria replied. You develop capabilities when your life depends on equipment functioning perfectly under impossible conditions. As the infiltration team prepared for deployment, Maria's leadership style revealed experience with missions where conventional military hierarchy couldn't account for the life and death decisions that team leaders faced under extreme stress. Everyone understands that this operation involves risks that exceed normal training scenarios, Maria addressed her team. But these hostages are depending on us, and failure isn't acceptable. We're going to get everyone out alive, because that's what we do when civilians and military personnel are counting on us. Quote, the final preparation phase revealed why the call sign Shadowhawk had become legendary in special operations circles. Maria's integration of intelligence, tactics, personnel management, and mission execution demonstrated capabilities that few military leaders ever developed. Colonel Mitchell, my team is ready for deployment, Maria reported. We'll have the hostages extracted and the terrorists neutralized within 45 minutes. Mitchell looked at the transformed logistics coordinator who was now leading the most critical operation Fort Liberty had ever conducted. Sergeant Vasquez, you have authorization to proceed. Bring our people home. Maria's response carried the quiet confidence of someone who had successfully completed impossible missions many times before. Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what we're going to do. The operation that would demonstrate why Maria had earned legendary status in the special operations community was about to begin. Her transformation from unknown logistics coordinator to tactical commander had taken less than an hour. But it revealed capabilities that would resolve the most serious crisis Fort Liberty had ever faced. The true reveal was complete. Shadowhawk was back in operational command, and everyone was about to understand why her night raid tactics had become the standard that other special operations personnel aspired to achieve. The operation began at 0447 hours when Maria's team moved into position around Building 47 with the kind of coordinated precision that comes from training under the most demanding conditions imaginable. What happened over the next 38 minutes would demonstrate why the Army Rangers had made the biggest mistake in their selection history when they rejected Staff Sergeant Maria Vasquez 3 times. Maria positioned herself at the primary observation point, a rooftop location that provided visual command of all Building 47 approaches while remaining invisible to terrorist surveillance. Her movement to this position involved climbing techniques and tactical positioning that revealed training far beyond what most military personnel ever received. Shadowhawk in position, Maria reported through encrypted communications, beginning Phase 1 reconnaissance. Using advanced surveillance equipment that she had requisitioned from classified military stores, Maria began detailed observation of terrorist positions and hostage locations within Building 47. Her analysis was systematic and comprehensive, identifying not just where the terrorists were positioned, but how they moved, what equipment they carried, and what tactical weaknesses their positioning created. I count 7 hostiles, not the 6 to 8 originally estimated, Maria reported. They're positioned in a defensive perimeter that protects against conventional assault, but creates blind spots at positions Charlie 7 and Delta 2. Hostages are consolidated in the main training area, approximately 14 personnel, all alive and uninjured. The precision of Maria's intelligence gathering amazed the Tactical Command Center. She was providing detailed information that conventional surveillance hadn't been able to develop, using techniques that demonstrated capabilities exceeding most special operations units. Shadowhawk, how are you obtaining that level of detail about terrorist positions? Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell asked through secure communications. By using observation techniques developed for operations where incomplete intelligence meant mission failure, Maria replied. In denied territory, you learn to see everything because missing details gets people killed. Phase 2 began when Maria's team initiated simultaneous infiltration through multiple entry points that conventional tactical planning had dismissed as impossible. Chen approached through the facility's ventilation system, Martinez infiltrated via security conduits, and Rodriguez gained access through structural weak points that only advanced architectural analysis could have identified. Maria herself chose the most dangerous infiltration route, a direct approach through what appeared to be the most heavily defended area of Building 47. Her movement pattern defied conventional tactical wisdom, but it demonstrated understanding of terrorist psychology and defensive positioning that came from extensive operational experience. Shadowhawk is proceeding through the primary defensive position, Maria reported calmly. Terrorist attention is focused on expected approach routes. They're not monitoring areas they consider impossible to infiltrate. Her infiltration technique was flawless. Maria moved through Building 47's interior with the kind of silent, systematic advance that suggested years of training in environments where detection meant immediate death. She bypassed security systems, avoided terrorist surveillance, and positioned herself within striking distance of multiple targets without being detected. All team members in position, Chen reported. Electronic countermeasures deployed. Terrorist communications are being jammed, and their external contact capability is neutralized. Demolition charges placed at structural points will create confusion without compromising building integrity, Rodriguez added. Ready to initiate diversionary explosions on your command. Maria's coordination of the final assault phase revealed tactical leadership that exceeded anything the personnel at Fort Liberty had ever witnessed. She orchestrated simultaneous actions across multiple locations with timing precision that suggested extensive experience with operations where perfect coordination was essential for survival. Execute Phase 3 on my mark, Maria commanded. 3, 2, mark. The assault was executed with devastating efficiency. Rodriguez's diversionary explosions created exactly the confusion Maria had calculated, drawing terrorist attention away from the actual infiltration routes. Chen's electronic warfare disabled their communications and coordination capability. Martinez's technical expertise neutralized their security systems and eliminated their ability to call for reinforcement. Maria herself engaged the terrorists with combat techniques that demonstrated training at the highest levels of military capability. Her movement was fluid and lethal, her weapons handling was perfect, and her tactical decision-making under extreme stress showed experience with life-and-death situations that most military personnel never encounter. Hostile neutralized at position Alpha 1, Maria reported, while continuing her advance through Building 47, moving to a secure hostage area. The engagement lasted less than 4 minutes. 7 armed terrorists, who had successfully infiltrated one of the most secure military facilities in the United States, were neutralized by a 4-person team led by someone the Army Rangers had rejected as unsuitable for their regiment. All hostiles down, Maria reported. Hostages secure, no injuries. Building 47 is under friendly control. The Tactical Command Center erupted in amazement and relief. An operation that conventional military planning had estimated would require hours of dangerous assault work had been completed in under 40 minutes, with no casualties to hostages or military personnel. Shadowhawk, confirm status of all team members, Patterson requested. All team members operational, no injuries, mission complete, Maria replied. Beginning systematic search of the facility to ensure no additional threats or compromised materials. The post-operation assessment revealed the full scope of what Maria's team had accomplished. They had not only rescued 14 hostages and neutralized 7 terrorists, but they had also prevented the compromise of classified materials that could have affected military operations worldwide. The terrorists had successfully accessed preliminary classified databases, Captain Foster reported during the debrief. Another 20 minutes, and they would have downloaded operational procedures that could have compromised special operations security globally. But more significantly, Maria's operation had demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceeded what most special operations units could have accomplished under similar conditions. Her planning, execution, and leadership had resolved a crisis that conventional approaches couldn't have handled, without significant risk to hostages and classified materials. What we witnessed tonight, Commander Patterson explained to the assembled personnel, is why Shadowhawk became legendary in the special operations community. This wasn't just tactical competence. This was operational excellence at the highest possible level. The transformation in how everyone at Fort Liberty viewed Maria was immediate and permanent. The reserve logistics coordinator, who had been virtually invisible for months, was now recognized as one of the most capable special operations leaders any of them had ever encountered. Master Sergeant Rivera approached Maria during the post-operation debrief with obvious respect and amazement. Sergeant Vasquez, what you accomplished tonight exceeded anything I've seen in 15 years of special operations. Where did you develop those capabilities? Maria's response revealed the background that had remained hidden throughout her assignment at Fort Liberty. 5 years leading classified rescue and infiltration operations in denied territory. 43 missions, all successful, with 0 casualties to personnel under my command. Quote, the numbers were staggering. 43 classified missions without losing a single team member represented operational success that few military leaders achieved in their entire careers. It explained why Patterson had shown such obvious respect when he recognized her, and why her tactical capabilities had exceeded everything they had witnessed. Ma'am, Sergeant Chen said, if you don't mind me asking, why were you assigned to logistics coordination when you obviously have capabilities that exceed most tactical positions? Maria's answer revealed the complex career decisions that characterized the most experienced military professionals. Sometimes the most valuable contribution you can make is preparing the next generation of operators. But when crises occur that require specialized capabilities, you do whatever is necessary to bring people home safely. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell understood that Maria's successful resolution of the Building 47 crisis had demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally changed her role at Fort Liberty. Sergeant Vasquez, I think it's time we discussed expanding your responsibilities to match your actual qualifications. The logistics coordinator, who had been taken for granted for months, had just led the most successful special operations mission in Fort Liberty's history. Her night raid tactics had not only saved lives and protected classified materials, but had also demonstrated why the most exceptional military professionals often choose to hide their extraordinary capabilities behind ordinary assignments until circumstances demand their expertise. 3 weeks after the Building 47 operation, the transformation at Fort Liberty was complete and permanent. Maria Vasquez was no longer the invisible logistics coordinator who processed equipment requests in the background. She had become the primary architect of revolutionary training programs that would influence special operations doctrine across all military branches. The Pentagon had taken notice of the Building 47's success within hours of the operation's completion. Senior military officials who specialized in special operations evaluation arrived at Fort Liberty to conduct detailed assessments of the tactical approaches that had resolved the crisis so effectively. Their findings would reshape how the military understood and implemented night infiltration operations. The techniques demonstrated by Sergeant Vasquez represent a quantum leap in special operations capability, reported General Patricia Hayes, the Pentagon's Director of Special Operations Evaluation. Her integration of electronic warfare, psychological manipulation of terrorist positioning, and multi-point coordinated assault created new standards for crisis response that exceed current military doctrine. The Army Rangers who had rejected Maria 3 times were now studying her operational methods as examples of excellence they aspired to achieve. The irony was not lost on anyone familiar with her background, but Maria approached the situation with the professionalism that had characterized her entire military career. Colonel James Bradley, the current commander of the 75th Ranger Regiment, requested a personal meeting with Maria to understand how their selection process had failed to identify such exceptional capability. The conversation was private, but its outcome was significant for military selection procedures across special operations communities. We've implemented comprehensive reviews of our evaluation methods, Bradley announced to his staff after meeting with Maria. Our selection process missed capabilities that represent the highest levels of special operations excellence. We're developing new assessment techniques that identify potential rather than just current demonstrated performance. But Maria's greatest impact came through the training program she developed for Fort Liberty and eventually for special operations commands worldwide. Her approach integrated night operations, crisis psychology, technological exploitation, and leadership under extreme stress in ways that hadn't been possible before her operational experience became available to training development. What we're creating, Maria explained to the Special Operations training staff, isn't just improved tactical techniques. We're developing integrated capabilities that prepare operators for situations where conventional training isn't adequate, and improvisation under pressure becomes essential for mission success. Her training scenarios were unlike anything previously available in military education. They combined realistic crisis simulation with decision-making challenges that tested not just tactical skills, but psychological resilience, innovative thinking, and leadership capability, under conditions that replicated the most demanding operational environments. Staff Sergeant Chen, who had participated in the Building 47 operation, became one of Maria's most dedicated training assistants. Ma'am, Your training methods have completely changed how I understand special operations. You've shown us that true operational excellence requires integration of multiple capabilities rather than specialization in single areas. The night infiltration techniques that Maria taught became the new standard for special operations training across multiple military branches. Her methods were adopted by Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, Air Force Special Operations, and Marine Corps units, creating unprecedented coordination and capability sharing between previously separate special operations communities. Commander Patterson, who had triggered Maria's recognition and transformation, became a regular collaborator in developing joint training programs that integrated her tactical innovations with Navy SEAL operational requirements. Their combined expertise created training opportunities that exceeded anything available through conventional military education. Working with Shadowhawk again, Patterson told Naval Special Operations commanders, reminds me why the most effective military professionals are those who continuously evolve their capabilities rather than relying on established procedures. Her innovations have enhanced operational effectiveness across all special operations communities. The impact extended beyond military training. Maria's crisis resolution techniques influenced law enforcement tactical teams, emergency response organizations, and security agencies worldwide. Her understanding of psychological pressure, technological exploitation, and coordinated response under extreme stress provided insights that enhanced civilian emergency capabilities. Federal law enforcement agencies requested access to Maria's training programs for their tactical response teams. International military organizations sought collaboration opportunities to incorporate her methods into their special operations training. Academic institutions studied her operational approaches as examples of leadership excellence under extreme conditions. But perhaps Maria's most significant contribution was demonstrating that exceptional capability often exists in unexpected places, and that traditional evaluation methods sometimes fail to identify the most valuable personnel. Her example influenced military selection processes, leadership development programs, and talent identification procedures across multiple organizations. The most important lesson from Sergeant Vasquez's story, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell explained to new personnel arriving at Fort Liberty, is that extraordinary capability doesn't always announce itself. The most valuable people in any organization are often those whose true potential remains hidden until circumstances reveal what they're actually capable of accomplishing. 6 months after the Building 47 operation, Maria received official recognition that acknowledged her contributions to special operations excellence. The Distinguished Service Cross, the Army's second highest decoration for valor, was awarded for her leadership during the crisis. But more significantly, she was offered positions with elite units across all military branches. Maria's decision surprised everyone who knew her story. She chose to remain at Fort Liberty, continuing to develop training programs and sharing her operational experience with the next generation of special operations personnel. Her explanation revealed the same dedication to mission success that had characterized her entire military career. The most valuable contribution I can make, Maria explained, is ensuring that future operators have access to capabilities and training that will keep them alive and successful in situations that exceed conventional preparation. Individual recognition is less important than collective capability improvement. Her legacy became embedded in military training doctrine worldwide. The Shadowhawk Protocol became the standard term for night infiltration operations that integrated electronic warfare, psychological manipulation, and coordinated assault techniques. Military academies studied her crisis leadership as an example of decision-making excellence under extreme pressure. Years later, when Maria transitioned to other assignments, her impact on special operations training continued through the enhanced programs she had developed and the personnel she had trained. Fort Liberty became known as the premier location for advanced special operations education, attracting the most promising military personnel from around the world. The Army Rangers eventually offered Maria a position with recognition that her capabilities exceeded their traditional selection criteria. Her response was gracious but firm. She had found her calling in developing the next generation of special operations excellence rather than pursuing personal advancement. The Rangers' offer represents recognition of capabilities I always possessed, Maria explained. But my current mission involves contributions that extend beyond individual assignment opportunities. Training the next generation of operators provides value that exceeds any single position. Commander Patterson's recognition of Maria's call sign had lasted only seconds, but its impact continued for decades. The moment when he had snapped to attention and called out Shadowhawk had revealed not just individual capability, but a broader understanding of how exceptional military professionals contribute to organizational excellence. Maria's story became legendary throughout the special operations community, shared with new personnel as an example of how extraordinary capabilities often hide behind ordinary professional responsibilities. Her example reminded everyone that the most dangerous assumptions are those made about people who seem to fit perfectly into expected roles. The 3 Army Ranger selection boards that had rejected Maria eventually became case studies in how traditional evaluation methods could miss exceptional potential. Their decisions were analyzed in military leadership courses as examples of why assessment procedures must evolve to identify capability that doesn't conform to conventional expectations. But Maria's greatest legacy was personal rather than institutional. Every operator who trained under her programs, every crisis that was resolved using her techniques, and every mission that succeeded because of capabilities she had developed, represented lives saved and objectives accomplished through her dedication to excellence. The logistics coordinator who had been invisible for months at Fort Liberty became one of the most influential special operations professionals in military history. Her night raid tactics didn't just save hostages during a single crisis. They revolutionized how military forces approached the most challenging operational environments. And it all began because one Navy SEAL commander took the time to recognize excellence that everyone else had overlooked, proving that sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we see potential that others have failed to acknowledge. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.